The mirror had become Emma Clarke's enemy. Every morning, she'd wake at 5 a.m. in her cramped studio, apartment above the Brooklyn bodega, and every morning she'd avoid her reflection as she shuffled to the bathroom. The scars that webbed across the left side of her face, souvenirs from the house fire that had claimed her parents when she was 19 had long since healed physically, but the world's reaction to them never had. "You'd be so pretty if it weren't for," a date once told her, gesturing vaguely at her face before excusing himself to the bathroom and never returning. That was 4 years ago. Emma was 32 now, and she'd stopped trying. Some people she'd decided were meant to be loved. Others were meant to be useful. She'd made peace with being the latter. At least, that's what she told herself every night when she crawled into bed alone. Her phone silent, her apartment echoing with the kind of quiet that makes you question every decision you've ever made. But Emma had learned to fill that silence with purpose. If she couldn't be loved, she could be needed. And in a city as cold and crowded as New York, being needed was its own kind of salvation. The Brooklyn community kitchen where Emma volunteered 6 days a week wasn't much to look at. Converted warehouse with industrial refrigerators that hummed too loud and fluorescent lights that flickered like dying stars. But to the 200 people who lined up outside every evening, it was a sanctuary. Emma had been volunteering there for 8 years, ever since the accident, working the serving line with a smile that made people forget, just for a moment, about the scars. "Miss Emma, you're an angel," old Mr. Patterson would say every Thursday when she'd slip an extra bread roll onto his tray. She'd laugh and tell him angels didn't exist in Brooklyn, but he'd insist, tapping the side of his weathered face. "I know angels when I see them. Got nothing to do with what's on the outside." She wished more people saw the world the way Mr. Patterson did. It was a bitter February evening when Alexander Chen first walked through the doors of the Brooklyn Community Kitchen. Emma noticed him immediately, not because he was handsome, though he was, with sharp cheekbones and dark hair that fell carelessly across his forehead, but because he looked utterly, devastatingly lost. His expensive wool coat was dusted with snow, his leather shoes inappropriate for the weather. He stood in the doorway like a man who'd wandered into the wrong universe. "Can I help you?" Emma asked, wiping her hands on her apron as she approached him. Up close, she could see the shadows under his eyes, the hollowness in his expression that no amount of money could fill. He paused, his voice rough from disuse. "I read online that you need volunteers. I'd like to help." Emma studied him for a moment. She'd seen plenty of volunteers come through. Guilty corporate types doing court-ordered community service. College kids padding their resumes. This man didn't fit either category. There was something broken in his eyes that she recognized, because she saw it in her own mirror every morning. "Have you ever worked in a kitchen before?" she asked. "No." He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But I'm a fast learner. And I have a lot of free time these days." That's how Alexander Chen, the billionaire tech mogul whose face had been splashed across every business magazine in America, became a volunteer at the Brooklyn Community Kitchen. Emma didn't recognize him at first. She didn't read business magazines or follow the news about Silicon Valley wunderkind and their empires. She only learned who he was when Maria, another volunteer, pulled her aside during their break. "Do you know who that is?" Maria whispered urgently, gesturing toward Alexander as he carefully ladled soup into bowls, his movements stiff and uncertain. "That's Alexander Chen." "The Alexander Chen!" He sold his company for $3 billion last year. "My husband says he's one of the richest men under 40 in the world." Emma glanced over at Alexander, who was currently fumbling with a serving spoon, his expensive watch catching the fluorescent light. "He doesn't look very rich right now." "What's he doing here?" Maria wondered aloud. Emma shrugged. "Same thing we all are, I guess. Trying to feel less empty." Over the following weeks, Alexander became a fixture at the kitchen. He showed up every evening at 5 sharp, traded his designer clothes for a simple apron, and worked until his hands were raw and his back ached. He didn't talk much, but Emma noticed things about him, the way he listened intently when the people in line shared their stories, the way he'd slip extra portions to the families with children, the way his mask of composure would slip sometimes, revealing an ocean of grief underneath. It was during their third week working together that Emma found him sitting alone in the storage room during break, his head in his hands. She almost walked away. Grief was private. And she knew better than anyone that sometimes you needed to sit with your pain alone. But something made her stop. "I want to talk about it?" she asked softly, leaning against the doorframe. Alexander looked up, and for a moment she thought he might tell her to leave. Instead, he laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "Would you believe me if I said I had everything and it still wasn't enough?" Emma sat down on the folding chair across from him. "I'd believe you. Money can't buy the things that actually matter. My fiancé died 6 months ago," he said suddenly, the words tumbling out like he'd been holding them back for too long. "Car accident. One moment we're planning our wedding, talking about starting a family, and the next," he made a helpless gesture. "Everyone told me to take time off, to grieve, to heal, but my apartment felt like a mausoleum, and all my so-called friends just wanted to network or offer condolences that felt rehearsed. I couldn't breathe. So I started searching for volunteer opportunities, and I found this place." "I'm sorry," Emma said, and she meant it. She knew the weight of loss, the way it could crush you if you let it. "The worst part?" Alexander continued, his voice cracking. "Everyone treated her death like a business setback. 'You'll bounce back,' they said. 'You're young, you'll find someone else.' As if love was just another asset to be replaced." He looked at Emma then, really looked at her. "You're the first person who hasn't stared at me like I'm a tragedy or an opportunity. You just treat me like a person." Emma felt something shift in her chest. "Well, you are a person. A person who's grieving. That doesn't make you tragic or broken. It makes you human." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two wounded souls finding unexpected solace in a storage room that smelled of canned goods and industrial cleaner. Emma didn't know it then, but that conversation was the beginning of something neither of them had been looking for. As winter melted into spring, Emma and Alexander's friendship deepened. They'd work side by side at the kitchen, then walk together through the Brooklyn streets afterward, talking about everything and nothing. Alexander told her about his childhood in San Francisco, about building his company from nothing, about the crushing pressure of success. Emma shared her own story, the fire, the scars, the years of feeling invisible. "People look at me two ways," she told him one evening as they sat on a bench in Prospect Park, watching the sun set over the city, either with pity or they don't look at all. "I'm either too much to handle or not enough to notice." Alexander turned to her, his expression serious. "I look at you and I see someone who shows up every single day to make the world better. Someone who remembers Mr. Patterson likes extra bread and knows that Mrs. Kim prefers her coffee with 2 sugars. Someone who made a bitter, grieving man remember what it feels like to be human again." He paused. "I see someone extraordinary." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "You don't have to say that." "I'm not saying it because I have to. I'm saying it because it's true." He reached over and gently took her hand. "Emma, I spent years in a world where everyone was beautiful and polished and perfect, and I was miserable. My fiancée was wonderful, and I loved her. But even that world felt superficial sometimes. Here with you doing this work, I feel real for the first time in years." "Alexander," Emma started, but he continued. "I know it's too soon. I know I'm still grieving, but I also know that you've become the most important person in my life, and I can't imagine my days without you in them." Emma wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. But years of rejection had built walls around her heart that were hard to dismantle. "You're vulnerable right now. You're grieving. I don't want to be your rebound or your charity project." "You're not," he said firmly. "You're the woman who reminded me why life is worth living. The woman who sees billionaires and homeless veterans and treats them with the exact same kindness. The woman who makes terrible jokes while serving soup and somehow makes everyone around her feel less alone." He squeezed her hand. "You're not too much or not enough. You're perfect to me." The words hung in the air between them, fragile and precious. Emma looked at this man who had everything the world valued: money, success, looks, and he was looking at her like she was the treasure. It was terrifying and exhilarating and completely unexpected. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too," he admitted. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." Their relationship unfolded slowly, carefully, Like two people learning to trust again after trauma. Alexander never tried to change Emma or fix her scars. Instead, he loved her exactly as she was, a woman who woke up early to volunteer, who saved stray cats, who cried at sad movies and laughed too loud at bad jokes. He integrated into her world rather than pulling her into his, showing up at the community kitchen, befriending Mr. Patterson and Mrs. Kim, learning everyone's names and stories. 6 months later, when Alexander proposed to Emma in that same storage room where they'd first really talked, with no ring and no fanfare, just two people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their broken hearts. She said yes without hesitation. The wedding was small, held at the Brooklyn Community Kitchen, with their volunteer family surrounding them. Mr. Patterson walked Emma down the aisle, tears streaming down his weathered face. Maria caught the bouquet, Mrs. Kim, made her special kimchi as part of the reception feast. As Emma and Alexander stood together, promising forever, she caught her reflection in the window. For the first time in 13 years, she didn't look away from her scars. Because when she looked at herself now, she saw what Alexander saw, not a woman too ugly for love, but a woman whose beauty had nothing to do with her face and everything to do with her heart. "You really think I'm perfect?" she whispered to Alexander as they swayed to their first dance. He pulled back to look at her, his eyes bright with unshed tears and unmistakable joy. "I think perfection is overrated, but you? You're real and kind and brave and everything I didn't know I needed. So yes, to me, you're perfect." In a world obsessed with surfaces, they'd found something deeper, not despite their scars, but because of them. Because sometimes the most beautiful love stories begin in the broken places, where two imperfect people see each other's souls and choose to build something extraordinary together. And every evening, they still showed up at the Brooklyn Community Kitchen, side by side, serving soup and hope in equal measure, proving that true wealth isn't measured in billions, but in the lives you touch and the love you choose to give freely to a world that desperately needs it.